The history of electoral democracy in Nigeria is replete with unregulated use and abused application of money and other materials in ways and patterns that create undue advantage for either the highest bidders or those with greater access to state resources. Consequently, heightened political activities, especially the accelerated electioneering motions, could pose an added risk to the recovery of the Nigerian economy. Now, predictably, the tempo would be sustained for the next couple of months, which typically increases distractions of the political leadership from governance and economic management. Now, we turn our focus to assess the impact of electioneering activities on Nigeria's economy. And for further analysis and evaluation of the potential earnings from this sector, we have Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Muda Yusuf is from the Center for Center for the Promotion of Enterprise, CCPE. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you, Bolanle.
Now, of course, the polity is getting increasingly heated, especially because of the political activities. The temperature is rising and the risk of political violence is growing. Let's review the implications of this, especially for the investment environment, considering the fact that the lack of security of lives and property could dampen investors' confidence. Dr. Muda.
Yes, the increasing tempo of political activities poses a number of risks to the economy and to the investment environment. As you have seen, especially during the primaries and all of that, we saw a couple of use of killings, violence, and all of that. And each time we have this kind of situation, it creates very serious concerns for investors because there's risk to life and there's also risk to properties and assets. So to that extent, the violence that comes with most of these elections, first you see a height of it during the primaries, and after that, when we come to the real elections, the level of violence is also likely to increase because of the desperation of the politicians for power. So the violence issue is a major issue. Then there's also the challenge that once we're in a political season like this, there's a lot of distraction by those who are in government. Greater attention is now paid to how people can return to office, to how the political parties can win the election. And you see a lot of our key public sector officials not being on seat, moving from Abuja to their various constituencies, just to keep tab of what is going on and just to ensure that they are not politically dislodged. So that also is an issue. Of course, for some of them, the law has compelled them to resign, but there are still some, they may not be contesting, but they have very serious stakes, very high stake in the political process. Therefore, they are still in government, but because of their stake in the political environment or the political process, there's a lot of distraction.
Yes, but let's review this considering.
Like that.
Okay. Yes, let's review this, focusing on investors' confidence. The fact that a lot of investors would not want to stake their investment in a country where there's a lot of political instability, violence, and a lot of politicking going on because of the forthcoming elections.
Yes, for investors' confidence, a lot of investors will be extremely cautious at this time. First, because of the risk of violence, and second, because of what we call policy and political risk. Because when we have elections coming, I mean, that means that very soon we'll have a transition, political transition at all levels of government. And when there are transitions in government, there could also be changes in policy. So that is where the political risk comes in. If you have invested based on a particular policy which is existing, and suddenly there's a policy change as a result of the change in government, then you have a problem as an investor. So for investors who are investing long term, at this time, they will slow down their investment to see what happens with the new government that is coming and what kind of policy is likely to come with. So the policy risk of investing, particularly investing long term at this time, is very high. The policy and political risk of taking on government contracts, particularly big contracts, which is likely to transcend beyond the current administration, whether at the state and the local government level, or the federal level, those risks are also high. Because you can take on a contract now, and the new administration comes and says, well, I'm no longer interested in this contract, or they begin to vary the terms of the contract, or they may not even pay you as a contractor. We have had that experience in the past, which has led to an accumulation of contractor arrears, which was run into trillions of naira, just because we had changes in government. Even if you have a change in government, even with the same party, these problems often arise. So for investors, policy risk and political risk gets elevated at this in a season like this. Therefore, they invest very cautiously. They invest short term rather than invest long term. So all of these things have a way of slowing down the recovery prospects of the economy. It slows down the scale of investment because investors are worried, they are concerned about what can happen if a new government comes and they begin to tinker with the policy.
But is this a general issue, or is it just peculiar to Nigeria?
Well, it's not so general. It's peculiar to many countries in Africa. Because many of the political actors sometimes don't see government as a continuum. Many of them, when they get to power, they want to start new projects. They want to disconnect from the past. They don't see government as a continuum, unlike what happens in many other
developed
advanced
countries.
Democracies. So that is why it's peculiar more to African democracies.
Okay.
Each government comes, you want to bring new contractors on board, you want to bring new projects, and that's why we have so many abandoned projects. About 5,000 abandoned projects all over the country. I'm talking of federal government projects now. The same thing with the states, the same thing with local government, just because of this political transition. So it's a peculiarity of most of the African democracy.
All right. Now, another peculiarity is the fact that it unleashes liquidity on the economy that's arising from a surge in spending, both by political actors and the electoral body. Of course, we saw what happened at the primaries, where it was alleged that some political party actors had to, induce a lot of people to vote for them, giving them different amounts of money in dollars and all of that. And the economy is already witnessing a significant injection of liquidity to fund electioneering activities, especially by preparations for the elections. Let's talk about the impact of this on inflation in the economy.
Yeah, injection of liquidity increases inflation. Already, one of the biggest problems that we are faced with as an economy, as investors, and as households or individuals is the high level of inflation. Inflation is galloping. For many products, we are talking about between 50 to 100% increase in prices over the last 1 year. So inflation right now is a big issue. And the injection of this liquidity, because when it comes to politics, a lot of spending is involved, officially and unofficially. And when you have this kind of spending, you have a surge in liquidity. It has a way of fueling inflation. That is one. Secondly, there's also been allegations that part of the reasons we had this sharp depreciation in our currency vis-a-vis the dollar is is because some of these politicians are mopping up the dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Because dollar is much more portable. You can easily dispense it. You can easily carry it around. It's not very bulky. That's a lot of value. So that has added some pressure to the demand for dollar. And which, I mean, we all know that the dollar has depreciated now to over 600 naira per dollar, which is a major problem for investors and everybody in the economy. So the use of dollar, or what some people call the dollarization process, has affected the economy also negatively. So from the dollar or dollarization point of view, and from the point of view of the injection of liquidity, the inflationary pressure has been further intensified. And that, of course, has implications for cost of production. It has implications for welfare. It has implications for purchasing power. That's implications for productivity and profitability of businesses. Because practically every business owner now is complaining, especially those who are SMEs, because of the problem of inflation. So there is a political or politicking factor in the current inflation that we are seeing. And because of the high level of spending, a lot of politicians are also withdrawing their deposits from the banks. You know, they are withdrawing their investment from the banks to generate liquidity to spend. So that, again, is taking some toll on the level of deposits in the bank. I know it is bank deposits that is used for lending. The lower the deposit, the lower the capacity to lend. You know, banking process or banking operation is essentially what we call financial intermediation process. You get funds from those who have surplus, you lend it for those who need it for investment. So if those who have surplus are now taking their funds out to go and spend it, it limits the deposits available for purposes of lending and creating credit. So those are the effects on the financial system, on inflation, and on the availability of credit in the economy.
There's also the fact that you already touched on that, though, but the fact that a lot of attention is now focused on politicking and inducements and getting people to, you know, the politicians are trying to get people, coerce them to vote for them. And now attention is shifting from governance and economic management. And of course, it is getting characteristically weakened, and political office holders are seeking desperately to retain their offices in the next dispensation. What impact do you think this would have on the business of government, especially when you look at the fact that approval processes for government transactions may have to suffer undue delays at all levels, federal, state, local government levels?
Well, it slows down the level of economic activity. It slows down the pace of budget implementation. It slows down the pace of implementation, especially on capital projects, on infrastructure. Because when you have a situation where the political actors are most times not on seat, they are in their various constituencies trying to mobilize votes and all of that. You know, unless you are talking of a transaction that will bring some immediate reward for them, the level of commitment to the governance process will reduce. Because what is of paramount importance now and of bigger priority is how to win the next election. So a lot of key political or governance issues, economic management issues have been relegated as we speak. I mean, if you talk to people who are seeking approvals from one ministry or the other, they will tell you how difficult it is now to get some of these approvals, because a lot of people are busy. Even some bureaucrats are also involved in politics covertly, you know, because they have very high stake in the political process. They are not contesting elections, but they are very strategic in the governance process. So they also, there's a lot of distraction. You know, so those things have a way of slowing down the tempo of economic activity, the tempo of approval, the tempo of implementation of projects, and also the pace of infrastructure development. So those are the concerns around the distractions that the political transition process creates.
You know, talking about infrastructure
to reforms.
Okay.
Yes, let me.
Yeah, talking about infrastructure development. You know, there's an ongoing strike going by over 5 months now. That ASU strike, which of course they've been making demands as to the infrastructure in the universities and the IPPIS scheme that they've talked about, saying that they want their own Utah scheme. These are some of the pressing issues, pending issues that have been neglected, and now all focus, all attention is on the electioneering and the 2023 elections.
Yes, those are some of the fallouts of the distraction that I spoke about. We all know what the implication of the long ASU strike is. And even just not ASU strike, even NLC and some other labor unions are also threatening strike for one thing or the other.
Even the Bakers Association.
There's no sufficient attention to some of the very vital issues that they are raising. So it's part of the consequences of the distraction in the political process. And you know what that means for the academic calendar? You know what that means even for the undergraduates. Sitting at home, many of them now have been indulging in some negative things which normally they should not have been involved in. You know, it has distorted the budgets of families and so on and so forth. So the effects are enormous. And there are also people who make a living out of the economy of the academic environment. You go to any academic environment, you have people who are photocopiers, printers, caterers, so many of them. We are talking of hundreds of thousands of people who make a living because there is an institution in their environment. All of those people now, for the past 4 months, nothing for them to do. So there are much wider implications for these long strikes. And I think, I was listening to the news yesterday, and some of them were saying they have not even seen the Minister of Education for quite a while. While this strike was even going on. It's not talking to them, they can't find, you know. All those things are things that should be really of concern. And sometimes these things are also consequences of the political season. The distraction and the fact that people are desperately looking for how to ensure that they return to power or to position themselves for the next power equation that will come up in 2023.
Well, there's also the high probability that, you know, apparatus and state resources will be deployed for electioneering activities by political appointees. And of course, we've seen that happen, especially with the different primaries that are held and the elections that even took place in Ekiti. Well, but if you look at the opportunity cost of such misappropriation for the citizens, it would be on the high side, especially in the light of the weak fiscal position of government at all levels. What do you think are the implications of all of these spendings?
Well, the implication of that first is that there's likely to be a much higher level of corruption because the politicians need a lot more money now to follow through or to fund these elections. So the level of corruption is likely to increase at a time like this. Secondly, the fact that if somebody is in office and is also contesting an election or the election or something, there's a great chance that the apparatus and the resources of the state will be used for this kind of thing. And we have seen quite a lot of that. People use government vehicles, yes, all these things for political campaigns. You know, a lot of these costs are not costs that should be borne by government. But because the political actors who are in government are also chasing these political seats and all of that, they use the resources of the state. So which is also a form of misappropriation of resources, which is also not a good thing for the economy. It's not a good thing for the management of our resources. And secondly, it creates the problem of lack of level playing field. If one candidate has access to government resources, apparatus, equipment, vehicles, and all of that, to be prosecuting a campaign, and the other doesn't have that kind of access, that is access of a level playing field. It's not equitable.
All right, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Good for our electoral process.
All right, let's wrap this up by flipping the coin and looking at the other side of the table, especially when you look at the beneficiaries of these electioneering activities, producers and distributors of souvenirs and other materials used for political campaigns and rallies. We see them benefiting from all of these activities. We also see those providing logistics for political rallies, crowd mobilization, media houses, of course, social media platforms and advertising companies, and all of these companies getting some revenue from all of these media campaigns, rallies, and political activities. Can these activities boost the economy in any way, or do you think whatever gains they might be able to drive would be overridden by the negative impacts of the activities?
Well, the high level of spending provides opportunities for some players in the economy. So to that extent, it is positive. It is positive, especially where the spending is taking place within our own economy. I mean, take for instance, people who are providing logistics for campaigns, for rallies. I mean, they need people to mobilize, they need vehicles, they need public address systems. Sometimes they get entertainers to entertain people. You know, all of these things, it's a lot of money that they spend. It is people that provide this service. And most times, these people are private sector people. Most of them are SMEs. So to that extent, it is positive for them. For them, in fact, this is a period of boom for some of those guys who are operating in that space.
Yeah, but is that boom enough to suppress all of the negative impacts that these activities pose?
No, it's not enough to suppress it, but we must recognize it.
Okay.
In the process of this, our economic analysis.
All right.
You are the one that said we should look at the flip side of it. it is positive for those people because they are earning more income and they are earning it legitimately because they are providing a service to politicians.
All right.
If you look at the media houses, a lot of media houses are also benefiting because the politicians are doing adverts, they are doing live coverage. They want their face to be seen on television, in social media, in print media, on radio and all of that. That they are providing legitimate service.
Yes, but is there a balance? Is there a balance to all of this, Dr. Muda?
Making some money. Come again?
Is there a balance to it? I know that, yes, there are those who are benefiting, but it also has its negative impacts. Where do we strike the balance?
Of course, the negative effect of some of these things is much more than the positive one. But if you are doing an academic analysis, you look at the positive and the negative. We have already discussed extensively the negative effect. We are now looking at it purely from an economic point of view. I mean, somebody has to print the ballot papers. We are talking about hundreds of billions of naira. Somebody has to print all these ballot boxes. Some people have to convey the electoral. You know, these things are huge spending.
All right.
And to the extent that these spendings are done domestically, and I must emphasize, all this printing of ballot papers should be done domestically, so that our local printing companies and all of that can get some jobs. The jobs will be created, income to be generated. So to that extent, it is positive for the economy.
All right.
So people are printing posters, they are printing banners and all of that. If this is done by all these guys in Shomolu and the rest of them, that is good business for them. So we cannot overlook some of these things. They are not negative, they are positive.
Yes.
You know?
I was hoping you would help us tie... Okay. I was hoping there was a way to strike a balance between the negative and the positive in such a way that the negative doesn't eat too deep into the economy.
the negative is already eating deep into the economy. I can tell you that.
All right.
But that is the reality. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, for your time on Business Breakfast this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a nice day. Yes, we've been speaking with Dr. Muda Yusuf. He is the Chief Executive Officer for Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, and he's been talking to us about the impact of the electioneering activities on Nigeria's economy. We'll take a break now. After the break, Nigeria's data usage increased by 413.79% as 41.38 million subscribers joined the nation's internet population in 4 years, according to data from the Nigerian Communications Commission. We assess the country's internet infrastructure and the progress made in the broadband penetration. And that's our next talking point on the show. We'll be right back.